All right, folks, welcome to GIS Day 2020 Facebook Live. Joseph Kursky here, your host. We are in for 60 minutes of maps, music, apps, why it all matters, careers, resources, and more. So I'm glad you've joined me today. One of the things that I wanted to do is to start off with, hey, what's GIS? Geographic Information Systems. Why does it matter? What are some things you can do with it, and how you can learn more about it in this 60-minute session. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Arcgis Online, for one thing, as a cloud-based GIS platform. Here is an Arcgis Online map. This one's showing live weather data right now. Let's pop up a legend. I've got some interesting statistics here. I've got some, 35 degrees up there in North Dakota, 59 down in Phoenix. So I can see some variation here. How did I make this? I added the weather data in ArcGIS Online with this Add button. I searched for layers and I added current weather. It's as easy as that. Notice in the upper right, I'm not even signed in, but this illustrates what a GIS actually is. The map part is here. Then there's a table of data behind the map. The map part is the G part of GIS. The table of data is the I part of GIS. So notice in this particular case, I've got 4,773 weather stations all over the globe. Yeah, it's not just the US. Okay, and so I've got that many rows in my table. That's my I part of GIS. And then the S part links the G and the I together. So for example, if I go here, and you can see that it's pulling from the table right there at Sedona, Arizona. Conversely, if I go over here and I say, oh, let's go center on selection, that particular record that's highlighted right now in Wisconsin, in this case, is the record that is in the table. So it's also selecting it on the map. So you've got a G part and an I part, and the S part links the G and the I together. Now, it doesn't have to just be weather data, of course. It could be something pertinent like current wildfires. Okay, that's a relevant topic for our times. So I've got current wildfires in ArcGIS Online, and just like with the weather data, I have a table of data that is linked to the map. It's a geo database. We've got 1,522, sadly, perimeters of wildfires in this map right now, as reflected in the table. So that's what a GIS is. It's a G part, an I part, and an S part. The reason why GIS is relevant is because, as I've shown there, it's all about health, transportation, natural hazards, water, energy, ecoregions, ocean currents, weather, climate, human health, you name it. All the current issues of our time can be mapped, and then not just mapped, but understood in a deeper, richer way that we can move forward with making wiser, smarter, more sustainable, more resilient decisions for the future. That is the essence of why GIS matters. And I like to think of it this way. What's where? Why is it there? And why should we care? What's where, why is it there, and why should we care? That is really the essence of why we're using Geographic Information Systems. Yes, students using it can get meaningful careers when they graduate. And yes, it is a valid way for you to contribute to your organization, whether it's government, nonprofit, private industry, academia, etc. But more importantly, it is a tool and a technology that you can feel good about. It's being used by the Jane Goodall Elephant Foundation, the Deforest Action People, the World Wildlife Organization, on down to your local city government to make, again, a more sustainable, healthier, happier planet. So that is what a geographic information system is. It's also sometimes referred to as this way: software. So we've got some tools, hardware. We've got a computer and some field tools, some field apps, and some mobile devices, methods, workflows, and spatial analysis tools, and people, the most important component, the network of people actually using this. Also, I like to think about it this way. GIS is a holistic kind of way of approaching the world, looking at the atmosphere, the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, the anthrosphere, the biosphere, all of those systems together holistically, how they interconnect. So the carbon cycle, the hydro cycle, etc. But also it can be specialized. You may be interested in just criminal justice with GIS, or racial inequity, or climate, or river systems, or soils, or geology. That's fine too. Be specialized, sure, but also don't lose sight of the holistic way of looking at the world. Now, GIS Day is a celebration that's been happening since 1999. So today marks the 21st GIS Day, actually, so it's pretty exciting. 21st GIS Day. at gisday.com, you can find out all kinds of resources about how to learn more about GIS. So there's no shortage of how you can learn for your videos and tutorials and other things. I invite you to explore that on your own. Now, one of the resources that I wanted to point out here is that I've got a new series of 10 resources of my own that I hope is going to help the cause, and that is GIS Helps. So in these videos of mine where I focus on GIS helps you understand the world. GIS helps you get a job. GIS helps in a double benefit way. What do I mean by that? Well, in a double benefit way, in that particular video, I've got, my twin brother Joseph and I talking about the benefits of GIS, double helping. And in that particular video, I actually mentioned the Osmonds. It's probably the only video in the world that has GIS and the Osmonds in the same video. The point is, GIS provides double benefits in that video. So I hope that's helpful. This is a whole list of the GIS Helps video series, okay? And that's on the Our Earth YouTube channel. Our Earth YouTube channel. Now, another way of going forward with this and realizing that GIS, learning GIS, teaching with GIS, using GIS on the job is a journey. It is not something you're going to learn in this 60-minute segment that we've got here today for GIS Day. But I submit to you all that it is infinitely worthwhile because, again, you're using tools to empower you to be a change agent in your community, in your school, in your university, in your nonprofit, in your government agency, etc. It empowers you to be a change agent to make things better, wiser, more efficient, help meet your organization's goals, help serve your customers, your patrons, your clients, or whoever they are. It empowers you to be a change agent. Also, I wanted to mention that I work closely on the ESRI education team with universities, community colleges, tribal colleges, technical colleges, and with schools, K through 12, primary and secondary schools, and with libraries, museums, and other places where education happens. We support all of those things. So think of us as your industry partner. So you educators using GIS, you students, you faculty, you deans, you department chairs, think of us as your partner. We're very interested in pursuing, a long-term relationship with you. We've been working at this since 1992. That was the start of our education program at ESRI, and we're in it for the long haul. Okay, we know that educational change happens slowly, but we believe that GIS can be a force for good in education because it touches on all those things you and I love as instructors about teaching, inquiry, problem solving, critical thinking, spatial thinking. In other words, active learning and constructivism. Now, as I have listed right here, another way, especially for those of you students that are like, well, where am I going to get a job using these tools that Joseph's talking about? I would highly encourage you to keep in touch with some of these resources I've got here. For example, state-based resources. Okay, state-based resources. Listservs, GIS communities in states, provinces, regions. Those are oftentimes kind of tight, close-knit groups. They're very open to sharing also, and they have a lot of job postings on those listservs and resources. For example, GIS Colorado, there's an Oklahoma GIS group, there's a California group, there's a Ontario, Canada group, etc. Okay, there's GIS groups all over the world. So I highly encourage you to get in touch with those, as LinkedIn and other resources that I've got on here. My 3 favorite web mapping applications to understand the whys of where. Let's go into a couple of those. First of all, the Wayback Imagery. And just 2 days ago, we have a swipe tool in there now. So not only can you figure, okay, if you go to the swipe tool, just do a search on Wayback ESRI, you can do this kind of thing. Wow, I've got this swipe tool now, and I can see in southwestern Las Vegas, there's a big old IKEA now in 2020, whereas in 2014 it was basically sand and some shrubs. Okay, so and you can also see the subdivisions going in there, very rapidly expanding area. But you can use this tool to analyze all sorts of things. Coastal erosion in England, the Three Gorges Dam in China, agricultural expansion in Saudi Arabia, the glacial retreat, and so on. You can also, for example, here, I'm going to go ahead and look at the decline in Lake Mead, which is a reservoir, really not a lake, but it's called Lake Mead, and you can see that in 2020 the water level was a lot lower than in 2014. And you can also pick which years you've got here on the left and the right side. So this swipe tool is extremely useful in education. You can make swipe maps of your own. Another thing you can do with this Wayback Imagery is you can go in the upper left here and say, I want to save certain images and bringing them into ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro. Why would I want to do that? Because I'm going to bring them out of the app, the web mapping application, into ArcGIS and ArcGIS Online and Pro for further analysis. That is the key. So it's good for level 1, which is actually just using the tool as is, and then level 2, bringing those layers out into a full GIS package so that you can do further analysis and combine it with ecoregions or population change or land use or zoning or whatever you want. So that is the Wayback Imagery. The Living Atlas Water Balance app, this is one of those Living Atlas apps. And the Living Atlas is a collection of about 8,500 data layers. And this Living Atlas has a water balance app. And I can use it for such things as, hey, I want to change it to precipitation. And I'm going to go to the Amazon. And they don't have a summer and winter. It's a wet season and a dry season, as you can see here. And it looks like the wet season is April, May, and the dry season every year is right around now, October, November. Fascinating. So I can use this for teaching lots of different things and exploring. You get these not real-time data, but near real-time data, so a month or two old. And I'm going to click on southern Libya here, and now I can see that in southern Libya, there's whole vast tracts of the year where there's absolutely no precipitation. And so you can link it to what you're teaching about, the convergence zone of the tropics and descending air and lack of convection and biomes and ecoregions. And then as a result, where does people live? There's not that many people in southern Libya because there's not that much agriculture and there's not much water to sustain human population. So this is one of those wonderful tools that are just, out of the box, and you can just start using them to teach in a live interactive mode. Current earthquakes, hydrology, population change, etc., migration, you name it. You've got almost a live feed for just about every topic nowadays. Not every topic, but we're getting there with the Internet of Things. So that is another one of my favorite apps. The other one is that I wanted to share is the Landsat Explorer. And so with the Landsat Explorer, you can look at different parts of the world in different wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum. So you can look at color infrared, you can look at near infrared, you can look at visible, lots of different things. You also have a swipe tool here, so you can look at different times of the year and different dates and so on. Looking at the Landsat data, which, as you probably know, is terabyte loads per hour coming in from the Landsat satellites. And we have a record going back to 1975-ish with the Landsat data. So you can look at all sorts of information way back when and see how things have changed. So it's a great tool for looking at our changing planet. Okay, so it's the Landsat Explorer. The most popular web mapping applications, well, sadly, the JHU COVID dashboard, which probably all of you have seen, everybody on the planet with a computer has probably seen this one because of the situation we're in right now. So this is another indication for why GIS actually matters. This isn't just eye candy. These are real data feeds coming in from a variety of sources, and the point is people want the information. They want to be able to guide their behavior, and communities want to know how to structure certain restrictions and so on and so forth. When do we open schools? When do we not? Based on this. So this is a dashboard, and the dashboard is really has really come to its own this year, I would say. There are thousands of dashboards set up on a variety of things: traffic, health, transportation, ecoregion health, water quality, etc. So just like the dashboard in your car gives you a real-time feed in a small amount of space. I also have a walkability map. So a topic I'm passionate about, walkable neighborhoods, if a community is walkable or not. So I have a story map right here where I have a little description of what is walkability, why do people care about it. I also have a survey inside of it where I indicate, hey, is this place walkable or not? Give me some indication, or rate the walkability of the site, tick all the choices that describe it. Do you know where it is, and did you have a photograph of it? So the result then is on my live interactive web map in ArcGIS Online, where I've got the walkability of different neighborhoods in here, along with the photographs that I and others have submitted to that survey. Okay, and then below that is a dashboard. And this is the same technology that the JHU coronavirus dashboard was created with. Mine is a lot simpler. It's just getting data from my one survey that I've crowdsourced, so you can actually take my survey. But more importantly, you could create a survey and a dashboard and a story map of a topic you're interested in, invasive species or dangerous intersections in your community, or water quality or weather or whatever else, urban greenways. I mean, you name it. You could actually create something like this, and I've got tutorials online where you can actually learn how to do that if you don't know how to do that right now. So Arcgis Online is really one of my favorite mapping tools. Also Business Analyst Web. You've got data in there with consumer preferences. Who buys diet iced tea? Who buys lottery tickets? Who commutes to work by bicycle? Who goes to the symphony, etc. All of that stuff is actually in there. It's part of the package, and it's all running in the cloud, nothing to install. You can create maps, infographics. You can create reports, drive times, walk times, all kinds of things inside Business Analyst Web. So I do love that. Also story maps, which actually this whole presentation that I'm giving right now is a story map, as you probably noticed on the URL at the top, storymaps.arcgis.com. It's a story map, and it's an effective way of communicating. So one of my favorite story maps is this one. It's a grim topic, but it's the passengers on the Titanic. And you see that it is useful for several reasons. First of all, it just within a few seconds, you can see the grim details of, first class versus third class and what your likelihood of survival was. Another thing that I like about this one is that it kind of shatters maybe preconceived notions of who was on that ship. So, for example, they weren't just from USA, Ireland, and England. There were from a lot of people from Scandinavia, from Lebanon, even a few from South Asia, etc. You can see the route of the ship, and also, since it's tied to a GIS, it's not just a bunch of points, lines, and polygons floating out in cyberspace, but you can see the actual fate of people with the database behind the map. And, of course, right here near me in Colorado, we've got Margaret Brown, the unsinkable Molly Brown, who survived, as you can see right here, and that's why she got the name Unsinkable. Okay, so that's one of my favorite story maps. I think it's a very effective way to teach history, geography, etc. Another one this is one I actually created. I did not create the Titanic map, but I've created one on a public art project. Cowboy boots of Wimberley, Texas. I love these boots, and these boots are made for walking. And so, giving credit where credit is due, I think it's important when you're authoring this to cite your sources. And here are some of my favorite boots, along with some videos that I have in here and some photographs. So check that out. It's the Cowboy Boots of Wimberley, Texas. The reason why I made it is in part to show that, hey, you've got some public art project or some other thing in your community that makes it special. Make a story map out of it. Tell other people about it. That's one of the things I wanted to share. My 3 favorite phone mapping applications. Time doesn't permit me to go into these in detail, but one of them is Mapillary. Mapillary allows you to create, and here's a essay I wrote on it. It allows you to create kind of like Google Street View, only you're creating it. So in this case, this is a circular path in Melbourne, Australia. Good on you, mate. She'll be right. That I collected in Mapillary. And so if you go to my track in that park, you can navigate along it with these little photographs that are stitched together based on the app's gathering of the data. So it's a crowdsourced kind of a app in the field. It's great for teaching and learning, and it's also great for communities if they don't have a Google Street View and they want, or any other like GIS, and they want to assess their infrastructure, like the condition of the curbs and light poles and tree species and so on. They can use Mapillary to gather that. So it's got a higher goal, but it's also good for student field work. That's one of my favorite tools. Survey 123 is another one of them, and I referred to that earlier when I was talking about my walkability map. So I deployed a Survey 123, which is an Esri tool, and I crowdsourced it so that you can and others can gather data into it. You can also upload your fitness apps into 2D and 3D scenes, as I did here, that I'm going to show you right now. So it's easily done. If you can get a GPX file from any one of those feeds, you can then look at your route, as I did here, as I was climbing this ridge in Southern California in the Chaparral. So that's easily done too. As long as you can get a file that you can map with some sort of latitude, longitude, or a street address, or a city-country combination, you can map things. You can even take a spreadsheet and map it in ArcGIS Online. So, all right, it's time for our Geo Songs, and as promised, we're gonna sing a few Geo Songs for you right now. I'm going to the field, baby, don't you wanna go? I'm a-going to the field, baby, don't you wanna go? I'm gonna collect some data in citizen science mode. I'm going to where the Wi-Fi's far behind. I'm going to where the Wi-Fi's far behind. But that's okay because we can collect data offline. Now that is a great song, which I've modified the words a little bit, but it's all about getting out in the field. How about this one? Rasters and vectors are the maps we two can share. Some of you may know that one. How about this one? I look at my maps and I see they need tending while my device gently beeps. Ooh, that was pretty bad. Okay, GIS crossword puzzle. I created a GIS crossword puzzle for GIS Day that you can take, that you can give part or all to your students or your colleagues, test their GIS knowledge. Let's do a few of those clues right now. See how well you do at the GIS crossword puzzle. Now, in here, in this particular blog post, you just search on GIS crossword. As you can see here, this is pretty extensive. I've got 400 clues in here, folks, and time doesn't permit us to go through them all. Let's just do a few of them. 16 across. A spatial term denoting features that overlay or cross each other. Think about that. 40 across. Type of thematic map in which areas symbolized in proportion to a variable that represents a summary of the geographic characteristic within each area. Ooh, no problem there. 69 down. University of Kansas cartographer George, who devised the natural breaks classification. Last one, 295 down. The standard deviation of the residuals or prediction errors. Okay, let's go into the answers here. What do you think? 40 across, the type of thematic map in which areas symbolized in proportion to a variable, that is a choropleth map. Some of you probably knew that. Probably all of you knew that. What about this one? 69 down. University of Kansas cartographer George, who devised the natural breaks classification. That was George Jenks, Jenks. Rock Chalk, Jayhawk. The standard deviation of the residuals. Hey, I'm not going to give you all the answers. You need to go and take this crossword puzzle. Seriously. I've got it in Excel and also PDF formats. Why Excel? Well, so that you could actually use the template to create your own customized crossword if you want to in the future. But feel free to use that one in any of the forms that I've got, and I hope it's a fun way for you to sort of test your knowledge, and you could be working on it this weekend. Hey, Joseph, I'm working on the crossword puzzle. And don't worry, I provide all the answers, but no peeking, no peeking. See how many you can get without peeking. Shakespeare was a GISer. Why do I say that? Well, consider the following. King Henry IV, Part 1, Act 3, Lord Mortimer and Cousin Glendower. Will you sit down? And Uncle Worcester. A plague upon it, I have forgot the map. It's in there. Let's chat briefly about the best geography and mapping related books I read in 2020. I'd love to hear your feedback on this and see what you loved this year, what you read. I'm on track to read about 80 books this year. I'm on a quest. That'll be about 25 more than I read last year. First of all, I just encourage you to read. There's so many wonderful, geo and carto and GIS related books. But even outside of that, read a wide variety of things, biographies and mysteries and other things. It's great for conversation starters, and it's great to find out what people are reading and get to know them a little bit. And I've actually had several collaborative efforts with colleagues, and the conversation has started with what we mutually like to read. This year I read Follow the River by James Alexander Thom, and that's about it's a true story of a person that was abducted by Native Americans in her home state of western part of Virginia and transported to Ohio to the Native American settlement there, and then she actually walked all the way back home from actually northwestern Kentucky all the way back home. Pretty amazing story of survival. And so it's an interesting portrayal of the conflict between the settlers and the Native Americans. There was good stuff and bad stuff on both sides. And anyway, it's a fascinating tale of geography and history. I also finally finished The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I actually listened to that on audio, which was fascinating because the author actually did all the Italian, English, Spanish, and French voices. Really, really well done. It's an epic. It's a saga of, again, weaving history and geography. In the Eye of the Hurricane by Nathaniel Philbrick was another one of my favorites this year because it talks about the importance of geography in the Yorktown and Chesapeake war scenario at the end of the Revolutionary War in 1783. In the year before, there were some disastrous hurricanes in the Caribbean, and the French fleet decided, hey, we need to get our ships out of here for the next hurricane season. So that's in part why they were up in Virginia, which of course helped the Americans quite a bit. And so again, history and geography intertwined, and geography actually matters. And then Monisha Rajesh wrote Around the World in 80 Trains, where she chronicles her voyage around the world with literally 80 trains, probably a little bit more than that as well. The fascinating places that she went include North Korea and Thailand, and so you get a lot of great vignettes of her interaction with the locals. And then I also, in part because he was a great friend to geography, as many of you know, Alex Trebek. I read his autobiography, which he wrote about a year ago ish, maybe earlier this year. And then also I read a biography that someone else had written about him maybe 10 years ago. So both of those were good, but his autobiography was really good. He did a lot for not just geography, but a lot of humanitarian work around the world that he didn't really publicize that much, but really good man. And we definitely are missing him. My favorite geography-related books of all time, The Mapmaker's Wife, about the French surveying team that goes down to Ecuador and surveys 1 degree of longitude at the equator. Fascinating. And then the voyage that a couple of them took across the Andes over to Guyana. Longitude by Dava Sobol. I think many of you know about that book, but it's a fascinating tale about the longitude clock and the contest there. And all books from Eric Larson, including Isaac Storm about the 1900 hurricane, Dead Wake about the Lusitania, and others. I mean, he's just a joy. Simon Winchester, too, very well-researched author, and his Map That Changed the World about the William Smith's map from 1810 in England and Wales, Krakatoa, and The Perfectionist, which is about engineering, but it's as much about geography as about engineering. Also, Andrea Wolf, and I had the pleasure to meet her at the ESRI user conference a couple of years ago, The Invention of Nature about von Humboldt. And then anything from David McCullough, including 1776. Great history and geography. I'm also rather fond of my own books that are on this related note. Interpreting Our World, which is about the revolutionary moments in geography, and also essentials of the environment. So snippets of what is biofuels, what is an ecotone, etc. So those 2 books I wanted to include there too. My 5 favorite data sets, that's what we've got time for right now, from the Living Atlas of the World. First of all, there's something called Manhattan Coffee, which, again, no login required, and it's the Starbucks locations. It starts in Manhattan, as the name implies, with a heat map. Okay, so you get the density. So why are there so many Starbucks around Times Square and not very many on the Upper East Side, etc.? So you can have a discussion with students about land use and traffic and businesses and tourism and so on and so forth. But then you can also use the same map to look at, well, what about my community? What about Fargo? Okay, are there any Starbucks there? Okay, there's a few. But what about in Crookston, Minnesota? None. Why? So again, the whole threshold idea, getting it across to your students. We were looking at IKEA before. How big does a city have to be to get an IKEA? How big does it have to be to get a Starbucks? How big does it have to be to get a Home Depot? For years, 5,000 people, especially in Texas, got a Dairy Queen. So if you had 5,000 people, you get a Dairy Queen. That was how the chain decided that the threshold would be. Anyway, fascinating to be able to look at this. And again, it's tied to a database, so you can actually look and symbolize these things differently, just like we were doing before inside ArcGIS Online. This particular one has 18,000 Starbucks locations. Again, being critical of the data and understand where the data came from and how often it was updated is really important here. But I was looking at real-time weather with you before, but let's look at popular demographics for a moment, if you don't mind. This is fascinating because inside the popular demographics layer is, as the name implies, quite a bit of data. So let's say we go to ArcGIS Online and we modify the map. We go to Map, we modify the map, and we add popular demographics. So you've got at your fingertips median age, median income, home value, etc., with this particular data set that comes from the decennial census and also from the American Community Survey. It's just fascinating, in part because you've got scalable layers. So you've got states, counties, zip codes, census tracts at your fingertips. You don't have to go to census.gov and download the Tiger files and then join it to the demographics. You've got it at your fingertips here. So let's say, okay, well, that sounds good, Joseph, but how do I symbolize that? Well, again, I'm just going to go to the change symbol, and I'm going to say, well, what I want is median age. There it is. And I'm going to say options, and I'm going to take, just for the interest of saving time, I'm going to take the defaults, and now I've got this sort of tan color for the younger and the purplish for the older population. So I can see at the county level now the different variations. So I can see some of these Great Plains counties having 45, 50-year-old median ages, and then these places in Utah having and also college towns influenced counties that have a 20, 25 median age. So fascinating to be able to look at the patterns. Again, what's where, why is it there, and why should we care? Who cares about median age? Well, I like to couch this in for students a real problem that they're solving. Okay, you're going to cite a certain business or a certain service in a neighborhood or in a region. Median age probably factor in there for certain kind of businesses or certain kind of services that you're going to offer. Maybe you have a target age that you're going for with your particular product or service. And then you can add other things, other variables, because right inside the median age and the popular demographics, you have, as you can see here, you've got a whole mountain load of variables at your fingertips, probably about 100 in this table alone. So that's one of my favorite data sets, and I'm sticking to it. The popular demographics. Wildfire perimeters or tornado tracks, fascinating to be able to look at that, because you've got tornado tracks, for example, at 60 years. So let's go ahead and, so we're going to search for layers, and we're going to search for tornado. Yep, and the tornado tracks are going to come in, because I like it because, in part, because you've got a wealth of data at your fingertips, but also it touches on the whole data quality issue that we've been talking about here. So we've got some tornado tracks, and again, it's a 60-year time period. So now we've got this pattern that we see. What are tornado patterns like related to elevation, to proximity to coasts, to latitude, to altitude? Those are the kinds of things we can explore here. Where do we see clustering and where do we not? As you probably suspected, in south central Oklahoma, there's quite a bit of clustering there. And also what's interesting is you can see the track and how they've moved, and they're all tied to a database. This is all part of a GIS. So you can see that, okay, this one, sadly, back in 2011 in central Oklahoma, there were people killed and people injured. And you can see the southwest to northeast trend for most of these tornadoes. Again, you could anchor it in your meteorological lesson about air masses and airflows and fronts and that sort of thing. Another thing that you can talk about is, let's say you go to a certain tornado like this one right here that actually was from 1976. And so in here, let's change the base map to something like a satellite image. One of the things I like to point out to students and have them think about is, okay, this particular tornado, you can get down right at the field where supposedly it touched down. Now remember, this is 1976. Doppler radar really wasn't a thing back then. And so all of these older tornadoes were pretty much from ground observations of damage or talking with local folks. Yes, it was over in that field and it went over that way. Anecdotal evidence, which could be very good, but the point is, even though we can zoom into 1 to 1,000 scale, that doesn't necessarily mean that the data was accurate down to the actual spot, that latitude and longitude, which we could measure right here. It doesn't necessarily mean it started at 34.879913 north latitude, okay? So it's a nice way of introducing the whole notion of data quality, reliability. And another thing to point out here is that, as you know, tornadoes are in part dangerous and scary because they don't follow these straight lines. Why do we have them plotted as straight lines on this map? Well, because that's all we had is the touchdown point and the liftoff point. That's why they're plotted as straight lines. We don't have the sinuous track data in this particular data set for these. So that's another thing to point out, is that they're mapped as straight lines, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they probably didn't follow a straight line in most cases. Another thing I like to do with maps is to shatter students, sometimes preconceived notions of how the world works. So for example, I'm up here in Colorado and a lot of students think, oh, we never have tornadoes here. But we actually do. Sure, if I change the base map to terrain with labels, you can see that there's definitely a influence of terrain. So west of the Front Range, there are a few, but there's not that many. But east of the Front Range on the Great Plains, we do have some tornadoes. Fortunately, not too severe, although we did have, I remember this one, I was at the Geological Society of America that day, and we did have a fairly big sized tornado up in Windsor, Colorado back in 2008. They do happen. But anyway, use maps as a way of kind of challenging, hey, what patterns are we seeing? Why do we see those patterns? And investigating the whys of where. That is the essence of Geographic Information Systems, is really trying to understand how the world works and all of its complexity. Fascinating. Okay, we better move on. Everyday and fun examples showing why it's important to pay attention to map data quality. I have a blog that my colleague and I started, Jill Clark and I started some years ago after we wrote a book on this subject. I know data quality sounds really boring, Joseph, but hang in there with me. The idea here is that we're using everyday examples in this particular essay to introduce the idea that, hey, just because it's online, can you trust it? Just because it's a map, can you trust it? So getting students to think critically about data, and that not just students, but the general public and everyone. So I wrote a essay last month about some recent examples that I found. George Mason University, search for it. Hey, simple Chinese fast food chain is what appears right underneath George Mason. Interesting. I thought it was a major research university. What about this one? I found this in a catalog. To be fair to the catalog, they eventually fixed this after I and a couple of colleagues saying, you really need to fix this. But map orientation matters. Oops, this is not continental drift. Another one to point out here is I was writing a paper recently, and I had to look up the location of the National Academy of Sciences. When I looked at the National Academy of Sciences, it actually netted me a location in a cul-de-sac in Metro Denver. This is not the National Academy of Sciences. This is someone's house at the end of a cul-de-sac. Why it appeared in that search, I don't know. We talked about the Internet of Things earlier and the live data feeds that come in. Sometimes those are an error. They have, okay, instruments can fail. So this particular one was up for a month or more. And I finally took a screenshot before they fixed it. Actually, it was several months. But I know it gets hot in Texas. This is really hot. But look at the... it's only 3276 degrees, but it feels like 3277 degrees. Also, look at the winds, 255 miles an hour. The precipitation rate, 655 inches per hour. This is like Noah's flood, you know what I mean? The only thing that's halfway normal here is the pressure, but the humidity is way off the scale as well. So anyway, be critical of data, even if it's coming from the Internet of Things and from a stream gauge or a weather station like this. They could be an error, so you need to use this tool. Always. You always need to use this tool. Your brain is the most important geospatial tool out there. I thought I was a pretty big Beatles fan, but this is passed off as an album, but it's actually someone's playlist, and it's not even spelled right. I mean, have you ever heard of the song Penny Lance? Penny Lance is in my ear and in my eye. What about A Day in the Sky? Never heard of that one either. How about Cans Buy Me Love? Anyway, be critical of data. Even non-map data is full of errors. It doesn't mean we don't want to use maps and digital, especially digital maps, but just be critical of the sources. And that's the whole point of this Spatial Reserves data blog and book. I invite you to take a look at it. Again, the posts in there, we publish one every week or two, and I hope it's relevant and interesting. I also have one in here about teaching ethics with GIS, one of the topics that's near and dear to me. So Spatial Reserves. All right, we better move on. Geo Quiz Time, folks. Geo Quiz Time. Name that place. This is going to be fun. I've got a variety of essays out there on how to create quizzes with these digital mapping tools, and this is the result of one of my investigations and development efforts. So I've got, in the presentation mode in ArcGIS Online, a simple name that place quiz, and I'd like you to explore just a few of them with me. Time doesn't permit us to do them all. But what about this one? Victoria Falls, Angel Falls, or Niagara Falls? So you're thinking spatially about, the orientation of the falls. Now, north is at the top here. You see this big fissure. You're looking at the vegetation around there. What if I change the scale? Would that help? If I change the scale and made it small enough, it's going to be a pretty easy to determine. Yes, it is Victoria Falls. All right, let's do another one. Mountains. Is this Aconcagua, Arenal, or Kilimanjaro? So you're thinking, okay, what do I know about all three of those? What's the surrounding land use like? So in this case, let's go in there. Let's zoom in. You can see some pretty active landslides. So you're thinking, it's got to be an active volcano. Okay, and I know that Kilimanjaro occasionally has snow on the top. May not have in the future with climate trends, but it is Arenal. It is Arenal, Costa Rica. So again, we've changed the scale, and we can see, we're being able to see Costa Rica right there. Okay, so that's in ArcGIS Online, and so it's a nice dynamic way of giving quizzes and assessing student understanding of various phenomena around the world. This is kind of a fun one, admittedly. Okay, urban rivers. London, Paris, or Hamburg. You see the sinuous nature of this river. You're probably looking at these radial street patterns. Okay. That is indeed Paris. All right, let's do one more. Glaciation. This is a bit more challenging. I know I've got some high-end geospatial thinkers on the Facebook feed right now. Norway, New Zealand, or Iceland? So if I look at this, I maybe would be able to say, well, if it's the southern hemisphere, the snowpack, the glacial ice is going to be more prevalent on the south-facing slopes, right? Whereas in the northern hemisphere, they'd be more prominent on the north-facing slopes away from the sun. So you can see here some ridges. And so, yeah, the south-facing slopes are more heavily covered. So it's actually, let's zoom out here. So it is New Zealand. Awesome. All right, so that is a little bit of the Name That Place. I've got others online, and I have a whole essay on the ESRI GeoNet Zone, which is a way for us to interact as educators in GIS. And it's a bigger community as well. It's got transportation planners and wildlife biologists and other people using GIS on GeoNet. But in the education zone, it's all about teaching and learning with GIS. And so I've got an essay in there about how to create quizzes with these interactive mapping tools, if this is of interest to you, or you can use the existing ones that are there. But if you want to create your own, feel free to use that. All right, 5 forces that bring us to what I believe is a pivotal time in GIS. First of all, geo-awareness. I believe that the awareness of issues that we grapple with, that we want to use and apply geospatial thinking and geospatial technologies to, are at an all-time high. People are aware of climate, natural hazards, health, population change, etc. Okay, and that's actually good for us in the geospatial world because the awareness helps build support for funding agencies and people's job positions, etc. Geo-enablement. People are enabled to use geospatial technologies, and in the past, the example I used to show is, okay, have you used your phone mapping app to find your way across campus or find the nearest public library or whatever? Now, I still use that, but I oftentimes use the JHU coronavirus dashboard, which is what we were looking at earlier, because just about everybody on the planet has looked at that, and probably numerous times. I mean, it gets millions of hits per hour, and rightly so. And hopefully we'll be past that situation soon. Geotechnologies. I can't emphasize enough how important it is for these geotechnologies to be in the cloud. It's great that you have your music online. What's not to love about accessing the Osmonds online, right? You get it anytime, anywhere, any device. It's great that you have documents online, word process documents, spreadsheets, so you can access them anytime, anywhere, at any device. And so you can also collaborate with colleagues on a paper that you're jointly writing. But geotechnologies online is even more important because the problems that we talked about, climate, weather, natural hazards, health, water, energy, they don't stop at political boundaries, right? They're not just one country or one city, they're global. And they don't stop at physical boundaries like watersheds or mountain ranges or ecoregions. And they also don't stop at disciplinary boundaries. They're not just economics, they're not just city planning, they're not just architecture, they're not just environmental science, biology, they're all those things, chemistry, they're all those things. So it's important that we have these tools and these methods and these data sets that are in the cloud so we can collaborate, because we need the economists and the planners and the geographers and the landscape architects, etc. We need all those people, the diversity of the community weighing in on, we need to solve these complex problems, and we need, again, a people with a wide variety of backgrounds. So I just submit to you that having GIS in the cloud is a huge leap forward, huge. Citizen science has been around since the 1800s, right, with the birding community especially. The bird species, the call of the bird, the feathers, the time of the day, the time of the year, et cetera, that bird was sighted. And that's still around, but it has been given a huge boost because of the ability to now map all of that citizen science collected data on invasive species, on the pine beetle infestation, on water quality in the wetland down the street from your school or your campus, et cetera. Okay, and agencies don't have the field staff that they did a generation ago. So it's even more important that citizens are collecting data. Sure, there's some data quality issues, but a lot of that citizen science collected data is actually quite good. And so it's lending a huge amount of data to this geospatial cloud. And the sensor network, the IoT sensor network, the human being component, 7.5 billion potential human beings collecting data, is an amazing thought when you think about people collecting data on that scale. And storytelling with maps. I mean, this whole thing that I'm giving right now is a story map. So it's a web mapping application. It's part of that Arcgis Online environment that I talked about earlier. And I'm giving the whole presentation today with a story map. Excellent. So stories, maps have always been used to tell stories, right, for thousands of years on clay tablets, wood blocks, on film, etched in metal, like the Al-Idrisi silver map of the 1100s, on more to today in digital form. Maps have always been used to tell stories. They're rich sources of information, give a lot of information in a short amount of space. So storytelling with maps has again been given a big boost with this web-enabled, cloud-based software as a service environment. Now let's talk about some key trends. These lists of mine, they're debatable, right? You may not agree with these lists. It's sort of like the 5 coolest places to visit in Oklahoma before you die, or the 5 coolest bands of all time, right, folks? They're subject to debate, and that's fine. I'd love to have a conversation with you all. But I just would submit to you all that 5 key trends are as follows. 3D. It makes sense that we've got a 3D world. This is Western Colorado behind me. It makes sense that we've got 3D analytics. Now, for years, we've had 3D visualization tools in a GIS, but now we've got actually 3D analytical tools. So we can look at not just terrain, but we can map variables like population in 3D. We can map accident patterns in 3D, et cetera. Okay, so that's a big deal because we've got a 3D world and we need 3D analytics to understand our world a bit better. BIM, Building Information Management, CAD, Computer-Aided Drafting, and AEC, the Architecture, Engineering, and Construction communities. The blurring of the lines between GIS, which has always been good about mapping exterior spaces, and the BIM, CAD, AEC community, always been good about mapping interior spaces. They're starting to talk to each other, and we're starting to have tools like ArcGIS Urban and City Engine and some others that help people understand the whole environment, the interior and the exterior. Why is that important? Well, what if there's a weather event on a campus, a university campus, at 3 p.m. on a Friday? And in a typical semester when the students are actually on campus, it changes every semester because of the different configurations of the classrooms. But also, if in order for that emergency plan to work, where the shelters, where do we need to get people, you've got to have the 3D building models and the campus map from a GIS. So you need the CAD, BIM, and the GIS all talking to each other again, to build emergency plans and build resilience on a campus. Real-time data and analytics. Now, I've touched on that several times in this hour with you all, but remember the weather feeds. Remember the stream gauging stations, the tornadoes and other things, the JHU coronavirus dashboard. I mean, you're getting real-time data feeds from a variety of sources. Again, be critical of the data and understand where the sources are coming from, but that is I think, a key trend that it's only going to expand in this decade, leading to a truly big data environment. Enterprise and web GIS. What I mean by enterprise is GIS is now becoming more pervasive in an organization, let's say a typical city government or a university, whereas in the past, not too distant past, it was, oh, the GIS people, oh, you need a map? Go see those GIS people. They're down the hall. They're a little nerdy and geeky, but they're nice people. Go talk to them. Now it's more pervasive in an organization where an organization values spatial data and GIS technology as an asset throughout the organization. And finally, artificial intelligence and machine learning. That is going to be even more important. Picture your typical video that you could take on a campus or in your town. What if every light pole, every tree species, every piece of pavement was automatically geotagged and assessed the condition? Oh, That way you don't have to gather every light pole and fire hydrant in your community, as is in the not too distant past, where people would have to gather that data laboriously and maintain it in their GIS. Sure, they're going to need to curate that data, but the data gathering part is going to be much easier with these algorithms from AI and machine learning. And that's, again, going to feed this whole big data environment. So again, more critical than ever that we understand, okay, of this sea of data, how do I understand what's the relevant pieces? But that's actually going to transform a lot of GIS jobs into more interesting ones, I think, because they're going to be more analytical jobs and less of the tedious sort of data gathering. There's 5 skills that I believe are important for you to move forward in your GIS journey. First of all, I believe asking questions is the most important. Organizations need people that ask questions that even their employer is not asking them to ask and investigate. You students out there, ask questions that your instructor is not even asking you. So dig deeper, be inquisitive, and that leads to being tenacious about tools, about solving problems, and so on. So I think asking questions and being curious about the world is the most important skill. And I would just also put forward that it's not just for GIS, it's for a lot of different professions. Geo foundations are still important. I would just propose this. A lot of people, I believe, in any organization need to know a little bit about geospatial technology. A few people need to know a lot about geospatial technology. The people that are designing the systems and maintaining the systems and designing the geodatabases, they need to know about these geo foundations, map projections, symbology, representation of data, how to build a geodatabase, how to feed data into the cloud, how to tile your data, etc., how to build a web mapping application, and so on, like a story map, field data methods, and so on. Anyway, the point is, a lot of people, though, I think need to know a little bit about GIS. So when I work with the students and faculty in the School of Business, I don't front end all of those instructions with, well, you need to know about building a geo. They want to map their customers. They want to map the competitors. They want to be able to understand human behavior and consumer behavior and do drive times and walk times and that sort of thing. And look at zoning and price of land and real estate and so on and so forth. Make infographics and reports. They want to do specific things in GIS, but they don't need to know everything about the shape of the earth and geodesy, for example. Sure, if they're making a global map with a study, I do talk to them about, okay, the map projection actually does matter here, and this is why. Ability to work with data. I've touched on this in the Spatial Reserves data blog discussion earlier, but again, it's easy. It's wonderful that we have these tools at our fingertips to bring in data from ArcGIS Online and various sources, isn't it? I don't pine for the old clunky days when, oh gosh, where do I find data and how do I get it to overlay and all that kind of thing, right? That some of you are familiar with. You know what I'm talking about. It's great that we have these tools where I can just add data into ArcGIS Online, for example. However, it's important to understand where that data came from. And if you're producing data, you want to practice good stewardship of that data, and you want to populate it with metadata. You don't need to write your master's thesis in there, but you need to explain where you got the data from, just like a term paper that you write, for those of you in school, where you got it, your sources, etc. If you're going to share that data that other people could use to make an informed decision, you want to have as much information as possible so that they can make that truly informed decision. But being able to work with data it goes beyond GIS. Goes into many professions, but I think it's very important in geospatial world. And also be flexible. I encourage you to think about the following. At a conference, go to some track that's totally outside your sort of wheelhouse. So I did that at AAG a couple years ago. I went to the social work track. I met a lot of interesting people. I learned about their methods. We had some things in common, and it was great. So I encourage you to do that. Read things that are outside your own wheelhouse. And also, another way to be flexible and stretch yourself is go outside of your comfort zone in terms of your region. Go international. Some of the most valuable experiences I've had as a geographer is the international trips I had to Taiwan and the UAE and Australia and Germany and etc. Costa Rica. And those have been extremely valuable and lifelong relationships formed, colleagues, and it's been grand. You'll really be stretched in lots of ways. And finally, have good communications, including your elevator speech. I think it's important for you to get your 1-minute speech down, your 5-minute, your half-hour speech for your board of directors, for your city manager, for your CEO, for your colleagues, for your audience, whoever it is. Have those down. I actually have on my YouTube channel, Our Earth, I actually have sample elevator speeches in real elevators if you really want to look at some of mine. But I encourage you to develop your own story. Also, I just want to encourage you folks, we've got some serious issues on our planet, don't we? But I have a Geo Inspirations column that I'm hoping, as the name implies, will be inspiring to you. I have people from all walks of life and from many different countries doing amazing things with geography, city planning, geotechnologies, etc. I write these and I interview these people. Some are podcasts, some are text, so that you can be inspired about, ooh, where could I work? And what kinds of problems could I solve? And what is this person? How did they get into this? And what was their pathway? So, for example, I've got an interview with Paulette Heiser, curating generations of cartography. She is the Geography and Map Division Chief at the Library of Congress. Really cool. Anyway, so I'm hoping that that's an inspiring thing for you all. Lastly, a couple key messages. The map is not the end-all goal. I know we're all on this feed right now thinking, maps, what's not to love? Sure, I love maps too. I used to work at U.S. Geological Survey. I've got tons of paper maps, and probably you do too. We could have a discussion on what your favorite map is, but the map is not the goal. The goal is to understand climate, weather, health, inequities, water quality, etc. The map is a means to an end. Okay. Also, don't get too excited about the tools. Okay. Don't get too attached to the tools. We all get excited about the new capability in the Wayback imagery that I showed earlier, where you can swipe now. Wow, that's awesome. Really great. But this is the most important tool, your brain. This is an actual photograph that I took in an actual high school. And some of you may know that this used to be someone's treasured part of their IT infrastructure, right? It was an old Mac, and now it's a doorstop. Point is, the tools will change. The data will change. The way we serve data will change. Some of the methods will change. But some of the fundamental questions that we have about our world will not change. We're still going to ask the where question, and we're going to still care about water quality and energy and sustainable development a century from now. Okay, those things will still be there. And so again, it's thinking about how you're going to solve problems with the geotechnologies or with any other technology, I would argue, that is the most important thing. So using this tool right here. All right, Geo Songs break. GIS Day, so good to me. GIS Day, it was all I hoped it would be. What about that? GIS Day to the tune of Monday, Monday. What about this one? I had a friend named GIS Bob. He got himself a brand new job. We thought he was the smartest guy in town. But I found out at the UC that Bob got his GIS degree. Don't you know where he can now be found? He's in the CART lab now. He's in the CART lab now. He spends all his time making polygons, points, and lines. He's in the CART lab now. He's in the CART lab now. That's Bob. I've got 3 verses of that on my YouTube channel if you really want to torture yourself. All right, ways to keep learning. Got 1 minute to go. GeoNet, as I mentioned before, my Our Earth YouTube channel, but also Esri YouTube channel. There's all kinds of good resources out there as well. Spatial Reserves, that data blog and book that I talked about. MOOCs from your university or from Esri. We've got about 6 or 7 MOOCs on Earth imagery, building web apps, all kinds of good stuff. The Learn Lesson Library, hundreds of lessons on how to make a story map, how to collect data in the field, how to do spatial analysis. Esri Press, with books, ebooks, and more. Newsletters like the GIS Lounge are great ways to learn. And as I mentioned before, your state, regional, national GIS communities, conferences, listservs, LinkedIn, etc. All right, folks, we are at our limit now. I say farewell, best wishes, map on. Hey, folks around the world, map on. How about this one? Just a map before I go, a lesson you can learn, solving the world's problems. They're easy to discern. All right, folks, all best wishes. Thanks for being here. Take care. Happy GIS Day.